We need to turn to the big news of the moment, I guess.
Sure do.
Terrible
Sorry.
The US presidential election. Decision by Joe Biden, obviously, over the weekend to step down. We might add in there a finally. And the mounting support for the current VP, Kamala Harris, who has enough support now from delegates to be on the ticket. Let's go through from the start. And the announcement from Biden, which he chose to do on social media, on Twitter and on Instagram, bit odd?
Very odd indeed. And his own staffers didn't know until a few minutes before he made the announcement. I mean, it was a real shock in the system. So I have been borderline abusive, including on this podcast, about Biden's refusal to stand down before. So I am, of course, delighted. It is the right thing to do. But it raises very fundamental secondary questions now being debated right across the American media and across American politics, like, if he is not capable of standing up to Donald Trump through a few interviews and on the campaign trail, why is he capable of being US president for the rest of this year? Really important question to which we don't have an answer.
Well, although it's different, a campaign to another 4 years in power, I think that's possible to square that one.
The word cognitive and the word decline perhaps apply in both cases, but I take your point. The second question, of course, is about the Democratic Party generally. Kamala Harris has not yet been elected ever to anything, certainly not in an open vote. She has been appointed in all sorts of ways. Her first shot at the presidential campaign ended before it started because it was so poor. So is this a democratic small d process, or is this the grandees of the party worried about their own self-interest imposing yet another candidate on the American people? That's a question. And I think it's a question also for the Democrats. You know, if Biden had been in decline for so long, and we've all been watching, we've all seen it, all those people who said week after week after week after week, he's fine, he's absolutely sharp as a tack, don't you say these kind of things. How do they feel now? Have they not been misleading people? They have just turned on a penny and said, he's a great man, what a fantastic decision, what a great patriot, what a great service.
But also throughout that whole period, Kamala Harris has been VP. You know, she's kind of part of the deceit in a way, isn't she? The
deceit, or the whatever you call it. She has seen at close hands what's been going on more than anybody else you'd have thought. No, the whole thing smells quite bad. Nonetheless, already the polls are showing a narrowing between the Democrats and Trump. And although there are lots of swing states where Kamala Harris, I don't think, can pull ahead of Trump now, there are some where she can. So this is a much more interesting race.
It's quite interesting that one person's endorsement is kind of conspicuous in its absence. Barack Obama, I believe, is the only kind of big name that has not come out for Harris.
I spoke to one of his closest aides yesterday who said Barack will come out for Kamala in the end, but it's a process thing. He doesn't like the great rush to, as it were, preempt the convention to force everybody into this. But I think now she's over the line with a number of delegates. Now so much money has come in, I think it's all over, and I think Barack Obama will endorse her as well.
And I'm right in thinking there's no chance now, is there, that another Democrat will put their names forward?
It seems hugely unlikely. I mean, people may put their names forward, but, you know, does the Democratic Party want to go through a great ideological fight in front of the American people between the left and the centre of the party so few weeks before the actual election itself? I don't think so.
Who do you think are going to be the top candidates to be her running mate?
So let's look at Gretchen Whitmer, for instance, from Michigan. Now, a very different kind of female politician to Kamala Harris, very, very successful in her state. I think an instinctive feel for sort of Rust Belt American politics in a way that perhaps Kamala Harris has not got. It would have been a really, really interesting all-female ticket. But sadly, she has so far excluded herself. I think Shapiro is up there. I think Gavin Newsom is up there, though having two Californians in the two jobs would be weird. Another thing, of course, if Kamala Harris is the obvious beneficiary of this, the fact that Biden did it so late, so soon before the convention, gave her this fantastic momentum. Was that part of the reason that she didn't put pressure on before? Was that part of the reason she kept quiet before? Was that part of the reason so many of her supporters kept quiet before? In other words, maybe this really is a stitch-up.
Yeah, I mean, I heard that theory put forward by a rival podcast, which will remain unnamed. But
I don't think there are any real rivals.
Not really. But yeah, I mean, you can't rule it out, can you?
There's one other aspect of this I think is absolutely fascinating because, we all follow politics because we don't know what's going to happen next, because we can't see around the corners, and because it keeps changing. And Kamala Harris has not been, in public, a particularly impressive performer up to now. There are lots of people. I was talking to Anne Applebaum, the Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, yesterday, and she said that she's met Kamala Harris a lot in private, and said in private she's completely different. She's very open, very bright, very engaging, very warm, very funny. She just doesn't do it in public, or can't do it in public. But the question is, she now only has a few weeks to turn round the way she is seen in public. At a human level, it's a fantastic story. Can she do it? Has she got it inside herself to make America see her differently in this short space of time? It's going to be an absolutely gripping watch.
I mean, what do you think we can expect from the presidential race now, with this shift to Kamala Harris, presumably?
Well, I think the first thing it does is it removes a sense of inevitability. I think when Biden was there, we all knew, in inverted commas, that Trump and now Trump-Vance would win. And, right across Europe, including in the UK, politicians have been quietly preparing and bracing themselves and thinking ahead for that likelihood, that eventuality. Nobody was really thinking that Biden was going to win, but there is at least a racing chance now the Democrats pull this round. And there are signs, there are reports and rumours of near panic in parts of the Trump coalition. So I think the first thing is interesting. And the second thing is there will indeed be, misogyny and racism directed at Kamala Harris. How far does that go? How extreme is it? How much do Trump and Vance disassociate themselves?
Well, Vance has been on the US networks calling her, what was it? Childless cat ladies.
What I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children.
Well, that is charming.
It's revolting.
And perhaps, I was using charming, huge inverted commas around it just because I did think it was charming. Though, Vance is interesting. I listened to a podcast he did about 7 years ago, actually, with David Axelrod, the great Barack Obama advisor. And he was really interesting on race because he was talking an awful lot about family and how defending your family, being really, really defensive and punching back anyone who attacks your family attacks you, and the importance of family, the importance of fatherhood was absolutely central to the way he saw himself politically. And then he said, and there's only one other group apart from us, white Appalachians, who feel the same way, that same American way about family, and that's black Americans. I feel real strong sense of engagement with them on that. I thought that was interesting. I think the fact that David Lammy, who I was talking to, the Foreign Secretary, really does see him as a kindred spirit in many ways around the early experience of fatherlessness and difficult childhood and all of that. He is a more complicated figure than his abusive and offensive public remarks sometimes suggest.
I mean, one thing that does happen now is that the Republicans have essentially lost a massive line of attack, haven't they? It's no longer Sleepy Joe. You have this energetic, much younger than Trump candidate to fight against. And that whole thing has gone out the window. Now who looks old? Donald Trump, 78 years old.
Absolutely right. It's flipped. He's the old guy. And Kamala Harris has energy. I mean, you just have to watch her come onto stages and engage with people. And I think she feels empowered and freed in a way that she hasn't before. Because you have to remember that all the way through as Veep, Biden was not very nice to her. I mean, they talk in public about how much their great affection for each other, their admiration for each other. But actually, he gave her the hospital pass of the border issue without giving her the resources or the policy to really resolve it. There was a lot of briefing against her. She's had a horrible time as vice president. And I think we might see a much more impressive, much more interesting, and a much more engaging, attractive Kamala Harris now begin to emerge.
Do you think Biden choosing to step down and not seek re-election, will that positively impact his legacy, do you think? I mean, I find it quite hard to buy. As you say, we've been saying for weeks, if not months, he's got to go. To leave it so late, it's difficult to swallow the Democrat line that he's put the nation first and It's a pretty grisly end to whatever he did. I mean, I think
what Kamala Harris might be able to do is to actually take the genuine big economic achievements and social achievements of the Biden administration, which he somehow had achieved, but he couldn't sell. He couldn't really persuade people that it was down to him. Maybe she will be able to sell those achievements, because one of the great mysteries, in a sense, is why, when America is doing so well economically, particularly compared to the rest of the world, including us, the leadership is so unpopular.